What is up, everybody? I am RC Gates, and today for our comic review, we are going to be taking a look at an action thriller comic, which might take a little bit too much from current events to create its story. And by current events, I mean events that would have been current 2 years ago in 2020. So, if you would please join me as we take a look at Richard Meyer's Pandemic. Alright, so this is Pandemic, a book by Richard Meyer, although more of you probably know him as your Boi Zack of Comics Matter. And this is an interesting book. And I don't mean interesting in the way that you're thinking of. Because this book, it unfortunately commits one of the cardinal sins of any comic book that would be put out. And that would be using current events in your book. Because whenever you do that, you instantly date your book. And whenever you date your book, that means that it's no longer timeless. If you come back to this book in 5 years, you're not going to care, because the current events that are going on in the book no longer reflect what's happening in your real life. So, this comic does draw inspiration from what was going on in 2020 with the coup and all of the restrictions and all sorts of stuff like that. So, there's not much that could make that work, but Zack decided to try to incorporate that into his book. And this is something that he is going to continue to try to do with a series of books that he calls Theosophy. And before we get into that, I'm going to get into the other stuff that I usually cover for comic reviews, because I want to get that stuff out of the way first. I pretty much already covered most of the story, or the background behind the story, but I'm going to get into the actual story bits of this comic. So, you have this girl named Clarissa, and she works with this company, and was apparently let go before this comic happened. And she's in there stealing all this stuff so she can make money by selling it. And she accidentally stumbles upon this meeting of all these mysterious bureaucrats and unnamed people. And she gets discovered by the guards, and she's... Okay, what's the way of putting this? Because I'm sounding like I'm just listing stuff that is happening. But unfortunately, I think I'm going to keep having to do that. So she's saved by one of these guys who's at the meeting. He's just like, okay, just escort her out of the building, just get rid of her, whatever. No one cares. And from that point on, it's pretty much just her running from everyone, because everyone's after her. All the police, the military, all sorts of people are going after her. And that's pretty much the entire comic. Pretty much just her trying to outrun all these people who are trying to get her because she saw something that she wasn't supposed to. And there's ways to make stories like that work, But this isn't one of them. Because everything progresses far too fast. If I was to look at this story and give it like a realistic timeline, it feels like it would take maybe an hour to happen. If I was to actually be interested in the story, I would want to see more stuff happening. I would want to see more of how she tries to outsmart these agents, these police officers, these military commanders, or whatever. But no, it's just her running. She's riding on a bike, she's just running. And she tries to use like some like quick wits to get through people and cause distractions, but they're blink and they're done moments. So there's not much intrigue behind it. And the story ends with... Do I want to get into how the story ends? Okay, so the story ends by setting up a group of people who are going to try to reinvent the world. And it doesn't really work. It honestly doesn't work because you have no connection to them whatsoever. You barely have a connection to Clarissa. And there hasn't been enough time to build that connection. So it really, like, the last panel is supposed to be like this: these are the people that are going to save the world because they're special somehow. And it falls flat because there is no connection. So that's the story. And I want to get into the characters. Now, as you can tell from the front cover, Clarissa, she is an African-American girl. Side of her head's mostly shaved. She has the typical like, what's the word? Like SJW type haircut. That's not something I have a problem with this character, because it's a character design. It's not necessarily something that factors into the story, and she's not written like a social justice warrior. So I don't have a problem with that. Problem is, there's not really much to her character. She's someone who was fired from the job. Now she's stealing stuff. Now she has to get away from whoever's chasing her. And that's pretty much it. You don't figure out much about her. You're not really given much reason to care other than she's the small fish in a big pond, and there's a bunch of piranhas and barracudas who are trying to eat her. So it's pretty much it. It's pretty much how she's trying to take back her freedoms or her take back control over her life. And that is a good motivation for a character, but I really wish it was written out better. I really wish it was, honestly. So there's not really any other major characters, so I'm going to cover the main bad guys. And they're just a bunch of nameless... I don't even know. It's like, they could be world leaders, they could be billionaire oil tycoons or whatever. They're not laid out. It's like they're just generic bad guys who are thrown in there for just the reason of they're the ones who are causing all the problems. They're the ones who are in charge of what's going on. And that leads us into the writing. Unfortunately, this needs a lot of changes. So, I've had this front page opened up for a long time. So you can see it and you can absorb it. And come back to this comic review in 5 years, 10 years. And for a comic called Pandemic, do you think that you would want to maybe put what exactly is happening on the first page of your story, or on some actual story synopsis? Because in the story, they reference stuff that would be going on with current events. Now, I'm not going to mention that. It's going to be they mention stuff that's going on with the COOF, or what stuff that you would expect to be happening in real life. But in the comic world, you don't know if this is actually what it's drawing inspiration from. You don't know if it's actually that. You don't know if it's some other sort of virus that's going on. You don't know what is going on. You're just told New York City, spring 2020. And then you're laid out this way. So, if there was something like a couple of text boxes saying, such and such virus ravaged the United States and it drives millions into hospitals and global chaos ensues, stuff like that, let you know exactly what's going on in the story instead of having your audience infer what's happening. Because if the audience has to think about what's happening, then you're doing something wrong. This is something that 10 years down the line, heck, even 5 years down the line, you're going to be opening this comic book and thinking, was there something that I missed? Because I don't know what's going on. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in just the first couple pages that you don't know what came before. You don't know what to expect. Even with these generic bad guys, they're supposedly the ones who are in charge of releasing this thing and causing all this global catastrophe and stuff like that. And you think that if someone was going to figure out or hear their plans or whatever, they're not going to spare that person. They're just going to put a bullet through their head and just call it a day. That would be nothing to them. Clarissa is an ant to them. Squash her like a bug. But the only reason why they let the character go is so that the story can progress. And that's really not good. Giving a character plot armor is not a good thing. So, those are just the issues in the first couple pages, and that lays the groundwork for the entirety of the book. Do I think there is potential there? Yes. However, this book, it is just a floppy. This book would have benefited from a prologue and multiple different pages added to it. There should have been way more story explanation. There should have been probably double the size of what this book is. And I feel like it would have been much more of a rewarding read if that had been there. So there is potential, but I feel like everything in the book was rushed. So that's a problem, and it really does diminish the story. So now we come to interest. And whenever it comes to this book, honestly, if this was my first book, and it was my first book from Boi Zack, I can't honestly say that I want to continue with the Theosophy series that he has. I know that there was 2 other ones. I think it was like the Ballad of No, and then there was another one which I completely forgot what exactly it was. But this one, as the first book in that, did not stick out to me. And it really cut me off from wanting to continue with that story, because this one felt so rushed and disjointed. Honestly, if the art was used for a different story, or if it was built upon, then I feel like it would have been much better. Because the art is good, and the characters do have their own unique looks, but the only one that you're meant to focus on is Clarissa. The villains don't stick out. They look like generic businessmen. Honestly, the background characters in the stories, like the military guys or the police women or whatever, they have more uniqueness to them than those villains. And I don't know if that was how it was meant to be, so you could say like, oh, these guys could be anybody, but it doesn't work for a comic. If you're going to have a villain, then they need to be someone who's going to be sticking out. Even if it's something that may not be fully realized in the real world, add something unique to them. I don't know, use it like a scar or something, like a facial scar, or one of them has like a blind eye or something. Add something to them so that they stick out and you remember them. Because the only person who has like some uniqueness to her in the story is Clarissa. And you don't spend enough time with her to figure out who she is. So that's a major problem for me, and it's really turned me off from the book. So that's pretty much all the stuff that I can cover with the book. Final rating for this is, you better be downing an IPA if you're going to be reading this book. It has potential, but it needs a lot of work. And it's mainly in the writing. And it's really disappointing because I was expecting a lot more from it. And I really wanted to like it. But all those issues were just way too glaring for that. Well, that is all that I have for you guys today. Please make sure to like, comment on the video what your thoughts are on this comic, and please make sure to subscribe as well to the channel so that you'll be able to see any future comic reviews or videos that I'm going to be putting out. If you would like to follow me on social media, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Truth Social. Those links are down in the description below. And thank you all for watching, and we will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.